If you do not understand white supremacy, what it is, and how it works, everything else that you do understand will confuse you. In all of these 9 areas of activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Anywhere on the planet, minute by minute, day by day, all of the time, all of the time, all of the time.
Let me say good morning and welcome to the Counter-Racism Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. The show is also called the CRCS for short. And the number to get in contact with the show is 516-453-9921. Or you can Gmail me at the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY @gmail.com. And I will hopefully get a chance to read your Gmails. By the way, if you call that number, make sure that after you dial the number or whatever you do, then press the number 1 button on your phone, and you will go in sequence or a rotation that will get your call or question expedited. So make sure you do that. Press the number 1 after you dial the number. Okay. It is 9:01 here in the eastern part of the concept called the United States of America, 6:01 in the Pacific. Glad we're not living in Russia. They have 11 time zones. Can you imagine that? But anyway, we are here. Live from Washington, D.C. is Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. Mr. Fuller, good morning, and how are you?
Good morning. I'm still learning.
You are still learning. Before we get into the questions and the calls, Mr. Fuller, I've been noticing that it seems that most of the nation is under they call it a quarantine due to the coronavirus. But as I was thinking this week and a few others that I communicate with, this seems so much similar to confinement, not greater confinement. And I was wondering your thoughts on what we are as a quote unquote nation going through.
Well, my thoughts is this is an opportunity for each person to self-train in being the quality person that all people should be. And that's totally constructive in everything, including every thought, every spoken word, and in every act that you take. And keep in mind what we need between all the people of this entire planet, and what was needed in the first place and should have continued that way in the first place, and that is a quality relationship between every person that encounters another person. You want a full quality relationship, meaning every move that you make, every interaction that you make with every other person on the planet be productive of a constructive result. And this is the time, this is an opportunity, really, if people are so-called shut in, wherever they happen to be, regardless of whether they call it confinement or, distancing from each other. This is, it's a tragic opportunity, but at the same time, it's an opportunity for people to really reflect on what is important and what is not important. I mean, because we've been inundated from the time that we are born with just so much this and that and the other, and run here and run there and breakneck speed here and got to do this and got to do that. We maybe don't have to do as many things as we think we do. We're overloaded with just, you got to be involved in this. You got to get yourself involved in that. in order to do what? Ultimately, what does it mostly amount to? And that's something that should be learned early, rather than sometimes people say that as people get older, they get wiser or something like that. Not necessarily so, but sometimes as you're in your waning years, then you begin to sort out for the first time the difference between a whole lot of noise about nothing and what is really important. But that should happen right from the time you're born and continue the whole time you're on the planet, breathing in and breathing out. That being able to, like a lightning speed computer, everybody's mind should be immediately going to what is important and what isn't, what is constructive and what isn't, and always lock on like a laser that which is of constructive value. And some people might say, well, but that takes all the joy out of it. And see, that's propaganda. That's something that people have been taught by people who believe in just making misery exciting and non-boring. I mean, manufacturing things that will make people all distraught and run into psychiatrists and all this nonsense, trying to straighten out your thinking, because it all comes from the way people think. People think before they act, one way or another, constructively or non-constructively. So if we just start out thinking in a constructive manner and given an opportunity, maybe sometimes for the first time doing that, because that's what happens when some people are sent to what we call greater confinement, what we call prison, incarceration, whatever you want to call it. Sometimes, particularly among black people, that's the first opportunity they have ever really had to sit down quietly and do some thinking about everything, because they are born under circumstances, many people are born under circumstances where everything is just totally chaotic going on around them. From little babies, all they see is a whole lot of anger and a whole lot of people throwing things and shots being fired and glass breaking and just things just being a complete mess. And they are born right in the middle of it. And they're always on that fast treadmill, out of breath, trying to run here, run there, do this, do that. So it's when they get locked up and sitting in a solitary cell, sometimes at age 30, a person might for the first time say, you know what, this is the only time I've really had time to think about anything. I've always had to, run from the, try to catch the bus, or get off the bus before somebody shot me on the bus. And then after I get off the bus, I have to outrun some gang and run through their territory. And I've been that way since a teenager, and it's only when I got locked up that I had time to really think about anything, about my entire existence on this planet. And it's under very unfortunate circumstances. Now, a lot of people can say that truthfully. Mm-hmm. And so now, in answer to your question, this is an opportunity, since we're kind of in what they call lockdown. Mm-hmm. This might be a chance to say, how can I, when this is finally lifted, if I survive it, become a quality person, meaning every move that I make is going to be constructive. I'm no longer going to be involved in anything that's non-constructive. I'm not going to have a non-constructive conversation with anybody. I'll just find a reason to get away from that talk.
Yes, sir.
Tell them I have something else to do and politely dismiss myself.
Yes, sir.
That's the codified way.
Yes, sir. So this is like, before we go to the question here, callers. So this is like turning a potential situation that a person may consider as negative into something that is positive by doing some critical thinking.
That's the way I see it, and that's the way under the codified way, the compensatory way, meaning what's making up for what's missing, and what's missing is always things being the way that they ought to be.
Yes.
So you always are in a mode of thinking about making everything that you're involved in the way that it ought to be, rather than the way that it is, because very few things, particularly interactions between people, very few interactions between people are the way that they ought to be.
Yes. Okay. Well, let's take a call. Let's go to Phoenix. And Daryl, you're on with Mr. Fuller. Please ask just one question, please. Go ahead, Daryl.
Good morning, Mr. Bobby, Mr. Fuller. Mr. Fuller, thank you for your work and your research that you have done on the subject matter. And by the way, the name is Darnell.
Okay, Darnell. Yeah,
yes,
okay, I got it. Apologize. Go ahead.
Okay. No problem.
Okay.
Mr. Fuller, in terms of white, non-white, and white supremacists, if a white person and a non-white person supports a white supremacist agenda, would that person then be considered a white supremacist? For an example, if a person was to support a Democratic Party or a Republican Party, for an example, would that person then be considered a white supremacist if a person supported a white supremacist agenda?
You're talking about if the person you're talking about is a non-white person?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
A
non-white person supporting the white supremacist agenda, is that person a white supremacist? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, sir. Or a white person.
Oh, any white person, yes, that supports the white supremacist agenda is by definition a white supremacist. You know, that's what white supremacy is. It's white supremacy, not non-white supremacy. If you're non-white, it's impossible to be a white supremacist. You automatically support the system of white supremacy if you're non-white in a system of white supremacy. You're born supporting the system. Just being born into the system, you're supporting the system. Otherwise, the white supremacists would not allow a non-white person to be born. They have the power to kill us in the womb, see to it that a womb is not even there for us to bring forth anybody anyway. They have that power. They have absolute power. They can see to it that not a non-white person is even born. They know how to do that anywhere on the planet. And after they're born, for sure, they come under the system of white supremacy. That should be obvious by now. That's why you have white supremacy. When that word white and the word supreme, well, you would put supreme in super capital letters. The white comes before then the supreme, should be just glaring. Meaning what? Absolute. Makes all the decisions about what's going to happen to a person of color. Not some, all. Person of color, has choices that they're allowed to make. But the white supremacists will look at that assortment of choices and see if he or she approves of those choices, which are very limited. So we're born in a system. They, as a non-white person, which is what I am, I'm born in a system in which a person who is classified as white is automatically my illegitimate parent, whether they would like that position or not. That's just the way it is. Because they have the authority to tell me what to do, and I better do it. And they can only be overruled by another white person. I'm going to emphasize that again. A white person in the system of white supremacy can only be overruled by another white person, period. It may not seem that way until you start investigating everything in detail.
Okay.
A black person, no matter how many black people say, well, I don't agree with that, I don't agree with that. In the system of white supremacy, a white person always makes the final decision on anything involving non-white people. They make the final decision. Now, on the surface, it may not look like that, but anybody who's ever put it to a test has found out, as far as I know, that that's always true. No exceptions.
All righty. Thank you, Darnell from Phoenix, for your question. Okay, let's see here. I have another caller, but caller, I don't know what your name is because it's not on my screen. Here, let's see if my technicians can get you clicked in. Okay, you're clicked in. Hello, caller. I don't have your name, but if you're still there, what is your question for Mr. Fuller? Okay, going once. Caller, are you there? Okay. This person is not responding, so I'm going to well, they're going to be gone here. Okay, Mr. Fuller, let's go to a Gmail here. We have plenty, so let's do this. This comes from Daryl, who is a loyal listener to you, Mr. Fuller. He says this, Mr. Fuller, you were ahead of the curve on this social distancing because in person, I noticed you weren't one of those touchy-feely types, always hand-slapping, dapping it up, hugging, giving hard handshakes to folks at your lectures. You know how we as black folk love doing when we are around each other. But you'd always maintain your physical distance while still being engaged with the audience and signing autographs. I also noticed you stopped traveling across the country to lectures and start doing live over the phone interviews like this instead. This quarantine thing has taught me is just how irrelevant it is for black folks, especially to always fly across the country to congregate for town hall meetings, interviews, etc. That's it. I ain't seen you in 3 years. Let me come by so I can see you, touch and agree, feel you, all that stuff. Technology makes it so we can be thousands of miles apart in seeing each other with FaceTime or Skype. Now, the news and other live shows have been forced into interacting this way, and I say good. So my question to you, Mr. Fuller, were you always like this? And if not, what made you become that way? Also, would you say that maintaining distance in terms of all the hugging and dapping it up fall under the code rule of minimizing conflict by minimizing contact? In other words, if you don't want to deal with all people in your space, just don't be around them. Don't show up to certain events, etc. Thank you for taking my question.
In answer to it, I'll give an illustration that most people, I think, if they think about it, can probably relate to. That I have raised this question. Have you ever noticed that you get along with someone for decades that you very seldom see or be in contact with? I mean, verbal contact. I mean, that person that you knew when you were a sophomore in high school and say that that was 20 years ago, okay? And in that 20 years, that interim, you've only seen that person or talked to that person maybe 4 times, and that was always on some type of situation where you didn't expect to run into them. And for an hour or two, say like, and I've given this illustration, you're in a train station or an airport, and you're waiting on your next flight, and you recognize that face, and you walk up to them and say, you know, call their name and something, and the person looks around and say, yes. Say, yeah, say, hey, you know, I know you, you know, it's been years, you know, and so then you talk. And that person has to catch a flight going in a different direction. You have to catch a flight going in a different direction. But you have about an hour and a half conversation there. And you get along splendidly, okay? Now, why is that? That's because you haven't seen them. You haven't been around them. But now here's the contrast. The people that are right next door to you, you fell out with them 8 years ago, and you all haven't spoken since. You had a big dispute about all those leaves blowing over there in your yard. All right? And then it almost came to an altercation out there on the sidewalk one day. One word called for another. See, being close does not mean you're together physically. So, really, this is kind of the root of the title of my book, The United Independent Concept, which means being alone together. Together alone. Now, I didn't invent that term. That's a term that I just heard recently. But that's basically what it means. You're alone, but you're together. That's the goal. That should be the goal of everybody on the planet. You should be able to function entirely alone most of the time and function with maximum efficiency and be in tune mostly with not other people, but with the logic, the constructive logic of the universe. That way you receive messages that only come to you without anybody else standing around making a whole lot of sounds that are going in your ears, interfering with the messages. That's why people sometimes go for a walk in the woods. Or I guess this man named Walden, W-A-L-D-E-N, he wrote books about meditation or things that have to do with meditation, being able to walk in the woods and just be alone, but in tune with the entire universe, being able to think in depth about the meaning of things, the true meaning. Because when you're around a lot of people, people are just throwing words at you all the time. And black people being, you know, under the system of racism, I mean, we're just starved for attention. Starved. I mean, it hurts us that nobody pays attention to us. I mean, we just die from that. Nobody's paying me no attention. You know, I'm going to scream and yell and make some noise so somebody will pay me some attention. And if I have to, I'm just going to start taking out my pistol and shooting into a crowd so people will pay me some attention. Millions of us are like that because we feel so closed in and everybody just brushing past us and nobody's recognizing me for my hairdo. And I went and paid all this money for a tattoo. I'm standing in the middle of the sidewalk and I'm making a speech. And people are just going on about their business like I'm not even there. I can't stand it. It's killing me. I'm going to hurt somebody. Somebody needs to pay me attention. My daddy didn't pay me no attention. My mother was always running around pulling her hair out. She's so busy, she couldn't pay me no attention. I didn't have no aunts and aunties. I didn't have no friends. I got to have some attention. Black people all over the world, particularly in the northwestern hemisphere, in the cities, and in a lot of small towns, starved for attention. What kind of attention? Any kind of attention. And when somebody does pay some attention, we just take it to the nth degree. High-fiving all over the place. Got 1,500 different ways of shaking hands. Fist bumps, hand clutching, hugging, pulling on each other's clothes, laughing loud. Ho, 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 ho. You can hear 3 blocks away. Always on stage. Gotta take the stage. Why? Need attention. I'm a baby. I need attention. You know what? We don't need nothing of the kind. Stop and be quiet and do some thinking for the first time in your life. Use your brain. And then you'll get attention.
Mm-hmm.
Constructive attention. That's the compensatory way. That's the way we should be all the time. Quiet. Like a well-tuned engine. I think there's an advertisement for the Rolls-Royce engine I saw one time. It said, it doesn't roar into life. Rolls-Royce is supposed to be an engine for an automobile made in England. And they say it doesn't. That advertisement said, the engine doesn't roar to life. You know, like you turn the switch and the engine roars. It said it doesn't do that. It said the Rolls-Royce engine is so perfect that it whispers its presence. But that's pure power, like the sun. The sun doesn't make any noise at all, but it's the most powerful body in this universe. That thing we look up at and call the sun. It doesn't make a sound. But it motivates everything. It makes the oceans roar. It makes the trees grow. It makes the flowers grow. Black people should be the same way. Quiet power.
All righty. All right, Daryl, that was the answer to your question. I'm going to take David. You're going to be next. But, David, I will have to say this, that we're about 2 minutes outside of a break, so I'm going to have to take that too. But you're on right now live, David. Go ahead with your question for Mr. Fuller.
How you doing, Mr. Bobby, Mr. Fuller?
Yes,
I saw
sir.
a video the other day, and the video was a suspected white supremacist putting the blame on other white supremacists, which he called like skinheads, the KKK, Nazi Brotherhood, Aryan Nation, stuff like that. And he was saying that what they were doing, they were going around spitting on the police entrance doors, the race soldiers, and other institutions, the FBI headquarter doors, trying to pass the COVID-19 disease through that. But I found it strange because this is a white supremacist, suspected white supremacist, saying that other white supremacists are doing this type of nature to white people who he would consider as civil, which I don't believe the police or the FBI are civil, but that's my opinion. And I asked the question, like, what kind of misdirection is this? Like, he's saying that the white supremacists are the Nazi, the KKK, the skinheads, and we all know that the Nazi, KKK, and the Aryan Brotherhood, they don't make any policy or laws. So, in my opinion, the white supremacists are the most powerful people on the planet because they can direct the way you live your life. So I wanted to ask Mr. Fuller, when those type of things come up, what do you think that the direction that they're trying to point us in, is it a misdirection, or is the suspected white supremacists actually trying to tell us some truth?
Okay, before Mr. Fuller answers that question, David, we have to take this pause here. So let's take this pause. For those of you that have just tuned in, welcome to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. And if you would like to get in contact with the show, you can dial 516-453-9921, or you can reach me by Gmail, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, @gmail.com. Now, if you call in, please make sure, for your sake, that you hit the number 1 button, and I'm told that when you do that, you will go in rotation to the top of the call list, and then you can get to Mr. Fuller can get to answer your question fairly quickly. So make sure you do that. Call in at 516-453-9921, and then hit the 1 button, and then I'll get notified, and you'll go up there. And Mr. Fuller will be discussing his book in about 15 minutes. But for all information that you need for this program and other things concerning counter-racism or the Counter-Racist Code, you can go to producejustice.com. That's producejustice.com, and all the information will be on that site that you would need to know. And make sure that you purchase that book, which he will talk about in about 15 minutes. Okay, David, now you were talking about you feel that this could be a misdirection of what they're doing. Ask your question again so Mr. Fuller can answer it, please.
Okay, the video was speaking about how a suspected white supremacist was informing the public that the white supremacists, which he called, or the KKK, the Aryan Brotherhood, and the skinheads were going around spitting on the doors of the police headquarters and the FBI agency entrance doors and trying to pass the disease around. So my question to Neely Fuller is this some form of confusion or misdirection of information to keep us confused as far as the system of white supremacy is concerned?
All righty. Thank you, David. Mr. Fuller?
Well, as explained in the textbook, the white supremacists have 2 major groups that they have manufactured in order to maintain white supremacy. And you can call them quote unquote groups, but they all have the same objective. The ones that go around with the swastikas and the tattoos, saying white Aryan and all like that, white nationalists and all like that, and drinking beer and passing by in a pickup truck and shouting at black people, calling them the N-word as they go driving by, shotguns, and Easy Rider, what they call them, out of that movie, in the back window on those racks. And so that type of thing. And the N-word this, the N-word that. Just about everything that they say is the N-word. Now, that's the unrefined white supremacists. So the refined white supremacists play the other role. They say, see, there they go. That's them. They're the ones causing all the trouble. If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have any racism. If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have any kind of color problem at all. They're the ones going around using the N-word and flying all those rebel flags. There they go. All right, keep your eye on them. Don't let them get out of hand. They're crazy. Bunch of beer drinking, alcohol swigging, corn pone, white people. A lot of them, got a decent set of teeth in their mouth and whatnot. They're the ones. They're the ones. Watch them. Send out squads and whatnot because they're just as crazy as they can be. All right? And no decent persons want to be anywhere around them. Okay. Now, who's that doing this talking? It's another white person.
Right.
But that white person is in total agreement with what they are doing. But he's talking, he or she, like he or she isn't. That's the refined racist. They never use the N-word. They're always willing to go visit black people in their houses and invite black people to their barbecues. Okay? Always willing. Arm around you. I mean, saying, hey, I help you, buddy, in any way that I can. I'm not a racist. That's racist man and racist woman, the refined ones. Now, there you have those two segments. Now, both of them are extremely dangerous, but the one who is refined is a whole lot more dangerous than the one who is half drunk and screaming the N-word out of a pickup truck. Okay?
Right.
Yes. I think that might answer the question. Now, they're the two segments are described in the book. But the refined racists, they are in full action now all over the world.
Yes,
and in every area of activity, they are confusing black people to the nth degree.
Okay.
I mean, but if, a black person will bristle up at a super refined racist, if you say anything about them being anywhere, they'll say that person doesn't have a racist bone in his body. I've known this white person. I put them to every kind of test you can name. Well, don't be so sure.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be so sure. Because the refined racist is what? A master of deception.
Deception, yes, sir. All right, David, thank you so much for your question. Mr. Fuller, because you described it that way, there was a saying that that used to go like this, that there's two sides to every story. But I've noticed that the white racists play all sides. And you just heard something about refined and unrefined, and the dangerous of the two are the ones that are refined, because you don't really see that coming. Would that be correct?
Yes.
Okay.
See, that's just it. It's the good cop, bad cop type thing.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's the art of deception. They're working together. They work together. They work together. I mean, behind the scenes, but actually, in a functional way, they may not even speak to each other, but they know what the system calls for.
Exactly.
It calls for that type of activity.
Okay.
And they know how powerful that is.
Mm-hmm. All right. Very good. All right. Let's go to the callers. Amen. You are now live with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. Okay. What is your question for Mr. Fuller?
All right. Good morning, Mr. Bobby and Mr. Fuller. My question is regarding, now in your book you say not to use the term progress, but to use like production, but the measurement of, progress or production of justice. Like, how do you measure that or measure effectiveness in your life? Like that, like you said, you mentioned on other calls that the reason that the white supremacists haven't stopped you is because you haven't been effective. So how do you measure effectiveness or measure the production of justice? Like, would it one day go from, injustice to, then there being justice, no person being mistreated, and, the people who need the most help get the most help? Will you see some sort of gradual improvement? And, with the system of deception that we're wrapped in, how do you know if you're ever making any sort of measurable, quote unquote, progress? Or effectiveness?
You have to pay attention to all details of everything. The small details and the obvious ones. And the big picture. You have to keep your eye on both. And always with one thing in mind. Just one. It's not complicated at all. Every move that you make is going to have what? A constructive effect or a non-constructive effect. That's all. There's no such thing as in between. Everything that you say is going to have a constructive effect or a non-constructive effect. So you always stick with the truth because you got to go with that. Anything that's false is not going to work. All right? The white supremacists are the masters of false. falsehood, as they call it. So you go the truth route, even when it hurts, because when it hurts, it should hurt. Hurt serves a purpose. It alerts you that something is out of order. So it's our job, the people on the planet, when there's any kind of hurt, that's like an alarm bell, to get busy and take away the hurt. And you do that with the truth and with justice and correctness, meaning everything that you say and do has a constructive effect, never a non-constructive effect. That's how you measure it in answer to the question. How do you measure whether you are making, quote, unquote, progress? You're not making any progress if the result is not constructive. The result of what you do doesn't have a constructive effect. Anything that people do, white or non-white, that has a constructive effect on all people, directly, indirectly, never a non-constructive effect, that is detrimental to the business, the gangsterism, the government of the system of white supremacy. Extremely detrimental. Why? It's because it is designed deliberately to have a non-constructive effect on people of color. It's deliberately designed for that. So the antidote, the compensatory action for that, is anytime you do or say anything that has a constructive effect on the minds of white people, non-white people, any people, babies, if it has a constructive effect, you are endangering the system of racism, because racism is not supposed to produce anything of constructive value for non-white people.
Could you give me an example of a constructive effect?
I'm sorry, we only have time for one question, please. I'm so sorry. We're jammed up.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your call. Okay. All right, Mr. Fuller. It is at this time where we designate this particular time for you to speak about your book, which is very important. So, Mr. Fuller, take it away, please.
Right. I wrote the book because, the reason why I wrote the book, I was needed a code for myself, because it looked like nobody was writing anything about what to do about stuff. Everybody was writing about how they felt about stuff or their experiences about this, that, and the other. I read lots and lots of books, so many of them, a lot of them I don't even remember. I didn't read as much as some other people, but I read enough. But I said, where are the books that tell you what to do about things each and every day, wherever you happen to be? If you're black and on this planet, is somebody writing something about what to do as an individual person? Most books that I saw that had some kind of instructions in it, after 300 or 400 pages, they would finally wind up saying, but with the hearts of the good men and women of the world, everything will eventually be all right. Exclamation point. And that's how the book would end. After telling you about this and who got lynched and, how this person was treated and how this person was rewarded for doing this, and the great black people of ancient times who did this and who did that and who built this and who built that and who traveled where and, and who they met and who they shook hands with. But not a single word about what to do about anything as an individual person. And I want to say that in this morning's presentation, because that's how I started writing my book. And I say that every book that is written from now on should be a book addressed to the individual person about what to do about something that will work. that when you do it, it works. That's what we need. We need to stop talking about touchy-feely books, about how many people you hugged, or how many people you met, and what kind of titles they had. We're crazy about titles, just title crazy, okay? And name dropping, and places we've been, and things we saw. But not a single word about how to solve a problem as an individual person. Not one. And it choked me up and almost made me angry and frustrated when I started writing back in the 1950s.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, yeah, you got to have background material and all like that, but background material is supposed to act as a foundation for doing something, get something done. That's what people are running around now, talking about, hey, all this rhetoric about this, that, and the other. Yeah, a lot of great talkers and great writers. We put that type of title on it, a great writer, a great speech maker. But what about getting something done? Does anybody know how to do anything? Because that's what people are starved for, a doer, a person that solves problems. That's what we mean by doing. Hey, what's the problem? Okay, get it solved in the next 2 hours, or else, all right? Or else what? Or else why talk? Okay? I mean, get something done. Get it done. And then the next thing that's got to be done, get that done. And the next thing, get that done. Nothing but doing. Just for doing. Not how you feel, not who you know. Get it done. So I started trying to write a book that's directed people to do that as an individual person, not having to look over your shoulder and see how many people you got with you. Because this coronavirus, I mean, is kind of seeing to it you might wind up alone anyway. Certainly when you're on that deathbed, you're going to be alone, because not even people can come in and say goodbye to you. So I wrote a book called The United Independent System. You're united with what you intend to do, but you're alone when you do it. And this is supposed to help, first of all, solve the race problem, and then get non-white people back to what they should have been in the first place, and what white people should have been in the first place, and that is the type of people who are universal and who speak and act constructively in everything that they do. And that's why I wrote the book. And you can get it by going to producejustice.com.
And the proper name for the book?
Sir?
The proper name for the book?
The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept.
Okay.
But another title, see, I had 3 titles for it, and it worked out. I put them all on, I just slapped them all on the front of the book. Because the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, that has to be explained in detail. Those words wouldn't mean anything. But then I said, to catch people's eye, a compensatory counter-racist code. That's the biggest print. And then in smaller print down at the bottom, I have a textbook workbook for thought, speech, and or action for victims of racism. And racism is white supremacy. And white supremacy is racism. Okay. And you can get the book by going to producejustice.com. And there's other material there, too.
That's right. That's right. Okay, before I read this Gmail, I'm going to take this call. Go ahead, caller. You're on. Who is this, please? Okay.
Yes. Hello?
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead. What's your call for Mr. Fuller?
So, my question for you, Mr. Fuller, is what's an example of a constructive effect, I guess, because I don't believe I have a good understanding of it.
Oh, a constructive activity?
A constructive effect.
We all
saying
know.
Things should have a constructive effect, regarding producing justice.
Yes, I'm going to give a simple example. You sit down to eat a plate of food every day. Most people do that who have access to food, or they wouldn't last very long. Now, just look at that food and then break down the components in that food, the vitamins and all of that, whatever it is that they say, the nutritional value, that's what it's called. Now, that food, when you put it in your body, it's called food, F-O-O-D. You will know whether that food is building you up or tearing you down, whether that food is nutritious, whether it's real food, or whether it's poison, because it's going to be one or the other. Now, it's poison in all food, which is why the body is made to get rid of the poison and keep the best part. The body is made that way. You take in the food through something you call the mouth, and then you have something called the digestive tract. And that digestive tract does what? It separates the real food from waste material, poison. And that waste material goes out of the body. The nutritious part stays. And it's the same way with every move that you make on the planet. A person, an animal, a creature, a bird, a fly, it's going to either have a constructive effect or a non-constructive effect. It's not difficult to figure out. You know when you feel stronger. And you know that when you drink a certain amount of alcohol or something like that, you get weaker. You fall down. Now, that's a non-constructive effect. And this is why the white supremacists see to it that wherever you have black people, you have very little that's nutritious in the way of food, like you're out there on your own farm or something. But you have a lot of little things where you can go in and get what they call plastic food, if you can call it food at all. It's all in a real pretty bag and all like that, but it's made out of plastic. If you look at the ingredients in it, you can't recognize what the ingredients are saying. They're not telling you this has got apples and oranges and broccoli and asparagus and cabbage and tomatoes. It doesn't say that. It says a whole bunch of stuff that you can't even recognize. It says on the package in small print. Small print so you can just barely make it out. But the package is all glitzy. And it'll have all types of things on the package that'll make you buy it. Okay? But it's artificial. And it's not constructive, to use the word that you asked me about. Because when you ingest it, you become obese. You keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, but you're not getting stronger. You're getting weaker. And your kidneys are failing. And you got diabetes. And you got all this other stuff. And then you start feeling bad about it, so then you go from that place where they have the artificial food to the place right next door. And that place has what? Alcohol. So that's to straighten out your mind about what you just did when you consumed all of that plastic food. Okay? So they got it well figured out. They call them food deserts where black people are in a lot of places. You don't get real food. And then they glamorize, you're sitting there with a bottle in each hand. And if the bottle doesn't work, now you get on the phone and you call your dealer. And the dealer brings you what? Something that you stick in your arm or something that you snort other than air, which is the best possible thing you can get. You can ask anybody about the coronavirus to verify that. Air is you want to inhale something, you inhale excellent oxygen, and it doesn't get no better than that. Non-contaminated air is better than any snort of cocaine ever invented. But the white supremacists say, oh no, you need something that I cook up and give to you. You don't want air. What you want is something artificial that I make that'll make you think that you're in heaven for a few minutes. And then when you fall down from it, you find that you are now a better slave to my system.
Okay.
That's the difference between constructive and non-constructive. I mean, it jumps out at you just by the result. You can always tell by the result.
Okay. All righty. I don't have a name here. Who is this caller here? Hello? Okay, gone. Okay. Let's do this, Mr. Fuller, in the remaining 5 minutes here. This comes from Mr. Warren, Brother Warren. He says this, Mr. Fuller, do you think that so-called colorism is white supremacy at work, indirectly having black people of a lighter hue in a country where there's mostly black people feeling like they are privileged blacks?
If the white supremacists, in answer to the question, if the white supremacists make that arrangement. See, they make the arrangement. The white supremacists say who's going to be privileged and who's not. So just always think about we are in a prison. So the prison masters always determine who's going to get breaks in the prison and who isn't. The prison master walks up and down the line and say, you, and you, come with me. And so you go with the prison master. You better. Okay, you're in prison. All right? You're going to get punished if you don't. You know that. So you've been picked out, and the prison master says, come with me. Didn't even explain anything. Just come with me. And the prison master takes you up to his or her office, racist man, racist woman, in the prison called the system of white supremacy. And they tell that black person, say, now you are going to be in charge of Section A of where I have the black people. And you will be in charge of Section B. And you say, well, what do you mean by being in charge? Say, you will make a bed check and see to it that in my prison that everybody is in the bed that they should be assigned to. Now, if you don't do it, I'll get somebody else to do it, and I'll shoot you at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. Now, you got about 3 minutes to make up your mind. Well, now, okay. And anybody who's been in a prison camp, you know, because they do that type of stuff. That's how they handle people. Most likely you're going to say, hold up your hand right quick before that 3 minutes is up. All right? Because you don't want to be shot at dawn. And you're going to get benefits by going around and making that bed check. And if anybody is ever missing that you checked them as present and they weren't there, now they have done this in wartime in a lot of prison camps, you get shot because you were supposed to be checking those beds and make sure that everybody is in bed at 9 o'clock. And if you happen to make a mistake, or you decide that you just didn't want to report somebody as missing because it's a good friend of yours and he was missing, you report him as being there when he wasn't, and they find that out, you're shot immediately. All right? You just walk up and blow your brains out right there.
Yes.
Right there in front of everybody so everybody get that message.
Okay.
So that's how they do that.
Got to cut that off right there because the first hour has come to a conclusion. So we thank you for listening to the first hour of the Counter Racist Code Show, or CRCS, with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. Stay tuned for the second hour of the Counter Racist Code Show. Okay, you are now, since it is 10 o'clock on the East Coast of the concept called the United States, 7 a.m. on the West Coast, you are now listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., and I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. To get in contact with the show, you may call 516-453-9921, or you can Gmail me at the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, B-O-B-B-Y, at gmail.com. Now, when you call in, after you dial the number, you can hit number 1, and you will go to the head of the line. Mr. Fuller will probably be answering a question or making a comment on something. You'll have to wait until he has completed that. Now, if you do call in, we would please, ma'am, please, sir, we would ask that you only ask one question. That's because there are many that have Gmailed me. There are many that have called in and want Mr. Fuller to answer their question. And if you get on, then you've had an opportunity. Give someone else an opportunity to have their question answered. So please, ma'am, please, sir, if you do call in, just ask one question. Don't be slick about it and ask 3 or 4 questions into one. Don't do that. Please, ma'am, please, sir. Just ask your one question and have Mr. Fuller address that so we can keep the show moving. Could you do that? Okay. Let's see. Let's go to this Gmail here. Mr. Fuller, this comes from Zachary. He says this. My question is, would you agree, Mr. Fuller, that if all of the non-white people of the planet initiated maximum emergency compensatory justice as a group, that would rid the world of all white supremacy? Thank you, and I appreciate your work.
Well, that would be something to be recommended. See, that's why I left it to the individual, because for one thing, it's too easy for one individual to talk about what some other individual shouldn't put up with. And that kind of ties in with what we talked about just a few minutes ago about light-skinned black people being chosen over dark-skinned black people, and that therefore are those light-skinned black people guilty of some type of crime against black people. That seems to be the implication, and the answer is no. Okay? So it's the same way with when it comes to making death. Anytime any person makes the death of another person, for one thing, if you willfully and deliberately do it, it should be for a reason that has to do with that person alone, that they just can't stand it anymore. See, when it comes to death making, no person on the planet should have the power to make another person kill another person. Oh, no. No. You shouldn't have the power to do that at all. I don't care who you are. No person should have the power to force one person to kill another. Period. You shouldn't have that power. So where does the power for killing, who should have it? The person that makes up their mind to kill someone. And they call it maximum emergency because it's maximum emergency. You can't go no further. You can't stand what's being done to you, not even being done to somebody else. You just can't stand it. No more. You've gone as far as you can go. And then that's the only thing that calls for maximum emergency. But I only talk in a limited manner about that section of the book. That's in Area 9 of the book, the last area, called War, Counter-War. But when people ask me questions about it, I say go to the book, because that's the best way to explain what that's all about.
And that book
in detail, and it goes into fine detail. I do not prefer to talk about giving answers to the questions on anything dealing with death and making death, deliberately killing people, except in the war section of the textbook for victims of white supremacy. Why? Because it can be too easily confused in a short conversation. Mm-hmm. And anytime you start talking about people killing people, there should be absolutely no confusion at all on anybody's part. Not one ounce.
Now, just
so
to be
I use
clear,
direct people. Hello?
Okay, just to be clear, when you say go to the book, we need to be clear here. What book are you? I know what book you're referring to, but the callers may not.
The textbook for victims of white supremacy that you get by going to producejustice.com. Okay. That's where maximum emergency compensatory action is described in detail. And you can take it for what it's worth because it's all explained in that section. I usually don't like to engage in any type of explanation of the explanations given in the book. You take it, read it, and take it for what it's worth, and act on it for whatever you think is worth to you to act on or not act on. But it had to be in there because this is war. Racism is war, and counter-racism is war. And in a war, people die. But there are ways that people should die and ways that people shouldn't. And so that's why it's given under maximum emergency in the 9th area of activity. And I don't like to talk about it because when you start talking about people killing people, that should be something so exact. There should be not 1 ounce of confusion, and there should be no questions because all questions should be answered when you start talking about it. And you should have a reference to it that people can go to. So there will be what? No confusion because you're talking about people killing people. That should be taken as very, very, very serious.
Yes.
Like under the system of white supremacy, killing people is nothing. I mean, people, even with this coronavirus going on, I read the paper every day. Just a few blocks from me, right now, one black person killed another black person. I mean, about some type of what we call hood beef. In the middle of all this death, hospitals already full, and the prediction is there's going to be more people brought there who have no choice because they caught this virus. And then you have black people who are still running around with pistols, talking about they got a beef with somebody, when all of them might be dead from this virus in the next 6 weeks. Just as crazy as we can be.
Yes, sir. Yes,
all
sir.
Right. So therefore, anything dealing with death in the 9th area of activity does deal with that. It shouldn't be any confusion about anything, about who kills who, when, and where, and what for.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Fuller. Let's go to the phone lines. Jonathan, I see where you have some VGQ for us. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Oh, hello. But, I mean, as I was listening, I think my VGQ has just changed to a question, if that's okay for Mr. Fuller?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. Okay, perfect. Well, first of all, I just received the book about a month ago from producejustice.com. I am a non-white male. I'm a black male. And the book came to me within 3 days, and I thought it was amazing and had some profound ideas in there that I didn't even really think of. And what I think is amazing about what Mr. Fuller has written is that he uses the power of defining words for yourself. And I have never given that much thought. But anyway, the word I had a question about in particular was father, the word father. Now, I read in the book that black people under this system of white supremacy, they should never consider themselves to be fathers or mothers because it's not possible for us to be so within the system of white supremacy because we're not allowed to. I hope I understand that correctly, but that's kind of what I gathered from what I read. Now, it just caused me to think about my father. I know Mr. Fuller would probably say male progenitor, but anyway, everything that my father did like his production of time and energy was so that his children could have everything that they needed. And we did. He successfully did that. We always had clothes. We always had a house. Our lights were always on. We were always taken care of. And he could have managed his time and energy in a different way to make that impossible for us. But he did manage his time and energy in such a manner to make sure that his children were taken care of. So I think my direct question is, why would you define a word such as father and put that definition out of the reach of black men, and the title of mother out of the reach of black women? Because when I look at what white males and what white females, adult white males and white females who have offspring, when I look at what they are able to do for their children, I don't think that they can do any more than also just doing what they can to make sure that they're taken care of.
Okay.
I just don't understand what else they can do either, because I've seen it. I mean, I'm surrounded by, all my life, surrounded by just pretty much predominantly white people. And they can lose their jobs and go homeless. They can drop dead and not be able to take care of their children anymore. But, I mean, I just don't understand why.
Okay, let me be clear. What is your question for Mr. Fuller?
Okay, here's my question, sir. My question for Mr. Fuller is, why create a definition for the word father and the word mother that is out of the reach of black males and black females when white males and white females can do no more to take care of their children than black males and females can do?
Okay. Give Mr. Fuller a chance to answer that question. Mr. Fuller?
Yes, sir.
If I understand the question, I guess the question is that white people suffer too. And so why is it that they're called fathers and mothers, and that black people should not regard themselves as having fathers and mothers,
yes, sir.
Black fathers and mothers? It's because of our prison condition. See, the prison people, the people who run a prison, may not get paid very much for being prison masters, all right? Just like they have white people, in what we call, to give an example, plantation days, there were lots of white people who were suffering. I mean, really suffering. But at the same time, black people were slaves, okay? There's a difference there. And sometimes the slaves would get better food than white people who were working hard every day and didn't have slaves. And who were these black people who would get better food? The black people who were close to the food. They're the ones who were picking the cabbage and all like that and planting it and whatnot. So sometimes they're out there picking grapes. So they're eating the grapes. Okay, and if there was enough variety of food there, they made out okay. I mean, and then the ones that were in the house, sometimes they really cleaned up. Okay? And they had much better food. Even the leftover food was better than what a whole lot of white people had who didn't have slaves. But every white person who didn't have slaves considered him or herself, well, at least I'm not one of those people, meaning black people. That's what the essence of black supremacy is like, okay? So now white people used to say, even when I was coming along, when it was right in your face, well, I don't have any money, and that black guy down the road there, he's got more money than me. But he knows one thing, that I'm a white man, and he knows what he is, and he'll never be what I am. Even if I'm down here starving, and he has plenty of food, he'll never be as good as me. Why? because I've been taught from birth that I'm white. And white means you're God. And even if I don't have no food in my stomach, I'm still better than all of them put together, wherever they may be. Limousines and all. There's nothing but a monkey in a limousine. And I'm not a monkey. I'm a white man or a white woman. That explains it.
Okay. Thank you, Jonathan, for your question. Okay. Let's see here. Let's go to this Gmail. This is from Furland. It says this. A question for you, Mr. Fuller. Has racist/white supremacist man, woman, and child reached the status of universal man, woman, and child at present?
Absolutely not. No one is qualified to say that they're in tune with the best that there is of the universe. I mean, we're nowhere close. White people, non-white people, we are all messed up. And the biggest impediment is the system of white supremacy, to us not being messed up. That's the biggest. Why? Because it's supreme. White people are in an excellent position to be universal man and universal woman, meaning people who practice justice, people who believe in doing the correct thing, people who do not find enjoyment out of other people's misery, people who do not like killing. They worship killing, and they teach black people to worship killing. Every book that you pick up, for the most part, every other book, is about death, death-making. I mean, they're crazy about it, and they teach us to be crazy about it. We're joining gangs and running up and down the street all day, shooting into a crowd and laughing about it. If that's not stupid, I don't know what is. It's an insult to the Creator on all of us. But the white supremacists are to blame for I would say, in the system of white supremacy, for all of it. Because the victims, non-white people, we're just copping after them with all this, I want to be a thug, I want to be a gangster, I enjoy being a thief, I enjoy robbing people. We get that from them. They teach us that. And they say that that's what we're good for. And anything of constructive value, they use just for enough to keep the rotten system going called the system of racism, which is all about glorifying mistreatment of people based on color. But you can't glorify the mistreatment of anybody based on anything, because mistreatment of any kind is contrary to universal man and universal woman. What is a universal man and a universal woman? A universal man and a universal woman are people who every move that they make, every breath that they take, is for a constructive reason.
Okay.
And produce constructive results. No white person is qualified for that, not one, and no black person. Why? Because of the system of racism, that's why.
All righty. This Gmail is probably under VGQ, but maybe you have heard some things about this. Myself and my research team, we have done a few things, but that's for another program. Anyway, this is from Brandon. He said this, Mr. Fuller, I would like to give you some information and to the rest of the listeners of your show. On or around January the 29th, 2020, the U.S. flew 201 people here directly from Wuhan, China, to the U.S. Before there was a single coronavirus case in the United States of America, knowing that the coronavirus was killing Chinese people daily, on or about February the 4th of 2020, 2 additional flights directly from Wuhan brought an additional 500-plus people here to the U.S. I say all of that to point out that 700-plus people who traveled from Wuhan, China, have been walking around the U.S. since early February, possibly spreading the virus when this could have been prevented. Mr. Bobby, I am no conspiracy theorist. Please have everyone fact check that information that I provided. Well, I'm not. This is Mr. Fuller's show. Like I said, I have done some research myself, but you called here to hear Mr. Fuller, not me. Mr. Fuller, have you heard anything about how this particular strain of the coronavirus has gotten here? I do know that the coronavirus is not just one. There are many strains to this. This particular strain is different from the other coronaviruses. But have you heard anything to the contrary or anything about the possible transmission or spread of this virus?
No, I've just heard, that the virus is being spread and that no one knows what to do about it because no one can recognize anything except people die from it and the symptoms of what leads up to the death. Coughing, sneezing, unsanitary conditions behind someone who coughs or sneezes who has the virus, and that's how it spreads. And you can be around people a few feet away from them and the wind blowing a certain way maybe, I guess, and you can get it. And that's all I really know except what I'm told. And that, I don't have as much information probably as some other people. But I just read the papers and look at television, and that's my source. So any of these things could be true. I have no way of knowing.
All righty. Let's do this. I have several people on the line. I don't have your name here, but I would ask this, please, when you call in, when the call screener asks you your name, would you please give them your name so I can go right to you? Right now, okay, Ishmael? Okay, thank you, Ishmael. Ishmael has a question for you, Mr. Fuller. Go ahead, Ishmael.
Thank you for doing everything you're doing. My question is, can there be any justice if there's technological superiority? One group has a vast technological superiority over the other group.
Can there be any justice when there is technological superiority?
Yes, like what if it's a war, if we're in a war, does it need to be technological equivalency to bring the balance in the war?
Well, if I understand the question, technology serves a purpose, but it serves the purpose of whomever has control of the technology. And in a system of white supremacy, the white supremacists have control of everything that has value, where non-white people are concerned. So, in a system of white supremacy, you can't have justice. I don't care what people are doing. It's incompatible. The system of racism, mistreating people based on color, is non-justice. Mistreating people based on anything is non-justice. So as long as you have people with the intention of mistreating people, and they have the technology to do so, hello.
Excuse me, could you turn down your radio, sir? Turn your radio down so Mr. Fuller can answer your question. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Fuller.
Yes, so if I understand the question, technology doesn't change anything. People have to change. And then people use the technology to do whatever the people who have control of the technology will do, whatever their intentions are. So if you have the incorrect intentions and you control the technology, the result is going to be incorrect in interaction between people, because technology is all here to serve people and the creatures of the planet. It's just by technology we just mean getting ways of getting things done. So if what I want to do is mistreat people, people are going to get mistreated. regardless of how I go about doing it, if I have the technology, the know-how in going about doing it successfully. So technology is neutral, like striking a match. You can strike a match and build a fire to keep a person warm, or you can strike a match and burn down a building. Depends on what your intention is. The match doesn't know the difference between one and the other, and the match doesn't care.
Okay. All righty. Thank you, Ishmael, for your question here. Okay, 10:25 a.m. Eastern Time. Let me go here. Wait a minute. Let me get his. Okay, tried to get that question in here, but I couldn't get it. Let's see if I get it here. Nope, didn't say. Okay. Okay, here's a question from the project. He said, Mr. Fuller, are so-called Italians classified as white?
I don't know. It depends on who does the classifying, and the white supremacists do the classifying. See, I can't say who's white and who's not. Or rather, I can say it. I can point to anybody and say that person is white and that person is non-white. But a white person will walk up and say, you don't know what you're talking about. I've just been overruled.
Mm-hmm.
That's the power of white supremacy. Neely Fuller has just been overruled. Neely Fuller made a statement about some white person actually being a black person. Neely Fuller said, well, point out somebody he thinks he knows and says, I happen to know that guy, that guy's mother is black. I know his mother. I know when he was born. I was there. I saw him being born. All right? And he's real light-skinned. So light-skinned, he looks exactly like a white person. But I was there when he was born. So I know what I'm talking about. And the white supremacists will look at me and say, I wasn't there. But you don't know what you're talking about. Because I'm saying the person is white. And that person will be classified as such.
Is that what the code says, Mr. Fuller, to address that question?
Yes, it does. The code book says white people determine who is white in the system of white supremacy. No black person can make that determination. I don't care what they say or how many degrees they go, what college they go to. No black person in the system of white supremacy makes the decision about who's white and who's not. If the white supremacists allowed black people to do that, the whole thing about race would be over. Black people are going to make that decision about who's white and who's not in the system of white supremacy. That's not going to happen.
Is that because black people forget that we are in a prison system?
Black people don't know that we're born in a prison system.
Okay.
We didn't forget it. We don't know it. We've never been told that. We've been told that we are free to do what we please. We have independent African countries and all that. And we built the pyramids and all that. And the white supremacists look at us and say, they shake their heads and wink at each other and say, don't woke them up, let them sleep on. Let them keep sleeping, let them keep dreaming. They're not aware that we pull all the strings, not some of them.
Okay. And with that, let me do this. Let me cue that music up so I can do this, please. All righty. We are at the last break point, and you are listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. If you would like to get in contact with the show, you can do so by calling 516-453-9921. And if you hit the number 1 button, you will be expedited to the head of the line. And when Mr. Fuller finishes answering someone else's question, then you will be next in line. So 516-453-9921, or if you prefer, you can Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, @gmail.com. I would ask that you not write me a novel, but ask me, your question, be specific, so that Mr. Fuller can address your question properly. And you must understand that when Mr. Fuller addresses your question, whether you call in or Gmail me in, that his questions or his answers will be according to the code. After all, the show is called the Counter Racist Code Show, and he will tell you and reiterate that we must operate with a code. As a matter of fact, Mr. Fuller, you have mentioned that several times. For those who don't know, and we do have 2 calls here, quickly, before we get to those calls, when you say a code, what do you mean so that the callers can understand that?
We mean having a set of rules that we make as individuals, that we adopt, where we always do the thing that will produce the most constructive result in everything that we think, everything that we do, and everything that we say to anybody, male, female, old, young, white, non-white, any person, any creature. We always do the correct thing. That's the kind of people we should be aiming at being, not just walk around talking about how proud we are to be black. We didn't have anything to do with being black, so stop talking about that. Never say that. What are you proud of? You didn't do it, so leave it alone. The Creator did that. You can take credit for something that somebody else did. Got to get out of that habit too. All right? Do something that is constructive, and then that's its own credit. You don't even have to take credit for that. It'll speak for itself. You did it, stand by your work. You just say you did it, and it'll stand on its own or fall. That's the kind of code we need. We don't have that. We need a code where we know the difference between doing the most constructive thing and the least constructive thing, and always doing the most constructive thing, the thing that will come out solving a problem the way the problem should be solved. That is what we call constructive. Okay. And we need a book for doing that. The textbook for victims of white supremacy. It should help each individual person.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, let's see here. And thank you, Richard from California. I got James and somebody else down there. Let's take James first. James, thank you for calling. You're on with Mr. Fuller. What is your one question, please, Sir James?
Good morning, gentlemen. I have a question for Mr. Fuller. Mr. Fuller, did you state that technology does not change people's behavior?
Oh, no, I didn't say that. If I said that, that was a real mistake. No, technology does change people's behavior. You know, people walk up and down the street now doing something they weren't doing 30, 40 years, I'll say, 70 years ago. And that is looking at a thing that we call an iPad. What is that? That's behavior. Walking up and down the street all day looking at a screen. That screen didn't exist at one time.
Okay,
so
well, I guess I must have misunderstood
right
you when you were speaking to the last person. Okay, I have another question for you. Do you think white supremacists would rather commit mass murder of their victims than suicide rather than having to consider an existence without the opportunity to dominate and mistreat them, such as what the Reverend Jim Jones, who was a suspected racist, decision to do? What is your perspective on that matter?
Now, are you saying, do I think the majority of white people will make that decision? Is that the question?
No, sir. I said, do you think white supremacists would rather do that?
Would rather do that? than
yes,
to give
sir.
up white supremacy.
Rather commit mass murder of all their victims than suicide, rather than produce justice and the correct thing as far as trying to restore their victims back to as healthy possible state as they possibly can.
My answer is, based on logic and based on the information that I have, or just my own individual thinking, is I don't know. But we can find that out simply by pursuing the production of justice, because at some point they'll have to make that decision. That's their decision to make.
Sir, isn't that what a significant number of people have been trying to do over the years? At what point can we decide, hey, we've been trying to do this for a significant amount of time now? I mean, you know, how long are we going to have to go with this process before we can decide whether or not they would most likely do that?
Well, like I said, I don't know. I just know that while I'm on this planet, while me, Neely Fuller, is on this planet, my assignment is to drive the situation where somebody is going to have to make that decision. That's my assignment, no matter how long it takes. I don't have any other assignment that makes sense. I came to that conclusion many years ago, back in the 1950s. That's what I'm here for. I'm here to try to replace the system of white supremacy with the system of justice and correctness and the production of universal man and universal woman. It's my only logical reason for existence, by whatever put me in this existence. That's the conclusion I came to. So in answer to how that will eventually play out, I simply say I don't know, but I just know what I'm supposed to be doing.
Okay.
And because when I think about all the other options that are presented to me, none of them make sense. That's how I did it, process of elimination.
Okay.
I said, what else am I supposed to be doing other than trying to replace the system of racism with the system of justice? I can't think of a single thing that makes the most sense.
All righty. James from North Carolina, thank you so much, sir. And don't be a stranger. Thank you, sir. Okay, let's go to Richard from California. Go ahead, Richard. You're on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
All right, good morning, and thank you. I have a question. It's kind of, I want some advice. Here's what happened. My wife is biracial. I'm black. My son is like you described the child being born about 10 minutes ago. You know, he's super, super fair skinned. He was in school, private school, Christian school, imagine that. He's in school, this little Mexican girl, she's half Mexican, half white. I know her dad. Her dad's Mexican. She was saying, oh, Richard, hey, you're white. You're white. And he's like, no, I'm not. I'm black. And, you know, it started an argument, so it bothered him. So I told him, look, without provocation, if she does it again, just say you're Mexican, okay? He waits. A couple of days later, she's at it again. He hits her with the you're Mexican thing, and she starts crying, and then I get a phone call, okay? But when I was down in the principal's office, I explained the situation, like, well, what's the difference? Her dad's Mexican. Her mom's white. You know, my wife is black because, in my opinion, if you mix you black and I'm black, what's wrong with you all letting my son be black? I just want to know, like, did I handle that the right way, or was I wrong for making my son do that? Because if you ask my son what color he is, he's like, look, I'm bright black. He's 8 years old, and he doesn't, I mean, he looks white. If you see him, he looks white, but he doesn't associate himself with white. He's like, I am what my father is. What would have been a better approach if that was not the good approach?
Thank you for your call. Mr. Fuller?
Well, I couldn't quite follow all the details of the story, but here again, I'm going to say, in the system of white supremacy, you just simply ask whatever white person is supposed to be, quote, unquote, in charge, and that might be just about any white person anywhere on the planet, anytime. When you look at me, sir, ma'am, am I white or non-white? And then you just don't go by what they say. They go by how they interact with you, okay? Because that is the determination. Now, when you start talking about Mexican, you do the same thing. Ask a person who is classified as white. A lot of people who are classified as Mexican are also classified as white. But it's up to white people to decide. Nobody decides what color somebody is except white people. They make the ultimate decision.
Okay.
Well, I mean, he's just a principal. I don't consider him like a man of power. Like, to me,
okay, wait a minute. I have a question.
You have no power.
But I have a question, sir. The person who goes under the title of principal, is that person white or non-white?
He's white.
He's white. That's the person that determines who's white. A white person
I don't think
always.
He has power.
Yes, sir.
I pay him to be in charge. I pay him to be in charge.
Wait a minute. Let me get your question. I got to. Everything has got to be exact in counter-racist science. So your question is what now?
All right. Here's my question. When I was wanting to know, was my approach wrong by telling my son, no, you tell that girl she's Mexican. If she says that you're white, you tell her she's Mexican. And it made her cry. You see, she classifies herself as white.
Hold it. Let's deal with one thing at a time. That's the compensatory way. We never deal with two things. We deal with one thing at a time. He told her that she was Mexican.
Right.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
And your question was, did he do the correct thing? Is that the correct?
Right. Right. Because
is that it? Wait a minute. Hold it. Don't
wait a minute.
Wait a minute, sir.
Sorry.
Don't. Wait a minute. Deal with one thing at a time. See, that's one thing that this whole program is supposed to get us in the habit of doing. We don't move to the second thing until we take care of the first thing thoroughly. That's the compensatory way. All right. Never move to the second thing, ever, until you deal with the first thing. The first thing was your son told a person that she was Mexican. Is that correct, that he did that?
Yes. Yes.
And your question is, did he do the correct thing? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. The answer, according to the code, is no. He did not do the correct thing.
Okay. Now I have a question. I have a statement question.
All right.
Well, but she, being a white girl, said he was white, and he said, "No, I'm not. I'm black," and it bothered him. That's why I told him to tell her. Well, tell her she's Mexican because her father's Mexican.
Well, hold it. Let's deal with that right now. Here is what the code says. What was supposed to happen in this conversation. Let's cut right to the chase. First of all, your son was not supposed to tell anybody what they are. You always call people by the name or title that they want to be called. You don't determine what other people are, period, ever, under any circumstance. And that applies to everybody of any age, whatever. That's code. That's why we need a code. A code is exact.
That's how it works.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Fuller.
I got you.
So that shouldn't have been done, because that started that chain of events of things, of a whole lot of other things that shouldn't have been done. She started telling him what he was.
Okay. I'm kind of pressed for time, and this is a very important thing, but I really am pressed for time. Mr. Fuller, did you answer his question?
I hope so, because see,
Okay.
this,
You did.
A big part of the confusion is, even when we're trying to solve a problem, we make more problems because we keep moving to the second thing without taking care of the first thing, because that first thing may take 2 hours.
Yes, but Richard
Just
did
on
say,
that
Mr.
first thing.
Fuller, that you answered his
Right.
question. And thank you, Richard. I really appreciate it, from California. And you don't be a stranger either, all right?
Oh no, it's
Okay. Thank you, Richard. Okay, let's get to Joy here. Joy, you are on with Mr. Fuller. Go ahead here.
Mr.
Joy?
Fuller, my call is in regards to the white English-speaking people and the white non-English-speaking people, because I think on previous shows you've explained the confusion with, per se, your white non-English Spanish-speaking, which would be considered non-white. So my question is, if a person is white from Italy speaking Italian, would they be considered non-white?
If a person is white and speaking Italian, should they be considered non-white? Is that your question?
Sir. Yes. White non-English
speaking. Okay. First of all, let's deal with the word Italian.
Okay.
What is Italian? What color is Italian? See, we're talking about color here. So what color is Italian?
Okay.
My answer is I don't know, because I've never seen an Italian color. I've never had anybody come under oath, have me swear in at a court. I'm going to give this as an example. If somebody did that right now, Fuller, you're on trial for your life, and we want you to identify a bunch of colors that we're going to put up here on the wall. So they put up every color that you can name. And then I am supposed to say what color is Italian. I think that I would get sentenced to whatever the sentence is, to imprisonment, for giving the incorrect answer, because I think that I would give the incorrect answer, because I don't know anything about what color Italian is. I don't have the slightest idea. I could not point to any color that you show me and say, now that's Italian color. That's the color of Italian. Just like purple and green and orange, that's Italian. That's Italian color. So when you see a person with this color, that person is Italian. I could not under oath swear to that. Now, maybe there's somebody who could, but it's not me. I've never seen an Italian color. I've never been taught what an Italian color is. Now, that just takes care of the first part of what we're talking about. Now, what's that second part?
The second part was the non-white or the white non-English speakers. And I think you've talked about it in previous shows for some of your listeners.
Non-English speaking what?
Yes, that have offsprings with, like, Spanish speaking.
Spanish speaking. Okay. So what's the question?
Would the offspring be considered white?
What color is a person that speaks Spanish? Is that the question?
Yes, sir.
Wait a minute. Okay, I want to get this question straight. See me? We have to get the question straight. That's the codified way. It's exact. I mean, it's mathematical. Okay. What color is a person who speaks Spanish? My answer is, I don't know. I'd have to see the person and make any kind of determination. I'd have to, but to ask me this standing on a street corner, what color is a person that speaks Spanish? The answer is, I don't know, and I don't have any idea of what color a person who speaks Spanish is. That's like asking me, like you mentioned English. What color is a person who speaks English? Now, I'm speaking, somewhat English, ghetto English, or whatever you want to call it. And so I could say, well, this person who's speaking the little English I've been taught, that I happen to learn, I am non-white. I'm black, all right? I'm not white. That's my color. My actual skin color is, I would say, medium brown, all right? Pretty close to it, somewhere in that range. But I am in the black category, all right? Because that's what I put down on paper. I'm black. I'm a shade of black. Medium brown is a shade of black. So that's the way I put it in the book. Black is basic. All other colors of people come from black. Black, brown, red bone, whatever that means, yellow, tan, beige. These are shades of black, according to the code and according to logic. And in racial categories, white is non-color. White is not a color. It's the absence of color. That's why black people in the system of white supremacy, by the white supremacists, are called what? In the old days, colored people. Or nowadays, people of color. People who have color. White people, when you start talking about paint, now paint is white because it's paint. It's not a person. So you'll say, this is white paint. I want a can of white paint. So that has a color. And when you're talking about paint, you're going to paint your wall, you paint it white. You say, I'm going to paint the wall white. And so you go into a paint shop and you ask for what? You ask for white paint, not green paint, orange paint. I want a bucket of white paint. But when it comes to people, it's not the same as paint because you're talking about people. Now, white people themselves say, we don't have color.
Okay.
Those colored people live over there across the tracks. It's white people over here, and white people are colorless. We are devoid of color.
All righty. Thank you, Joy, for your call. We appreciate it. We're up against a lot of time here. Listen, callers, I said this before, but let me reiterate this again. Because of the volume of calls that come in from Mr. Fuller, and you know that he will take his time in answering your questions, we are asking, ma'am, sir, that if you call in once a program, let that be it, because other people would like to call in and get their questions answered, and people Gmail me, and I can't do that, and I do not want to rush you, and I am not going to rush Mr. Fuller off of the phone. And we have three things we have to do. We have to talk about his book quickly, and then a question about the $1,200 stimulus that we may not get to, and then this last one, racial classification. Is it deliberate confusion? We may not get a chance to get to all of them, not with 6 minutes to go. So let me do this. Mr. Fuller, could you quickly give a word about your book, and then we'll move right on.
Go to producejustice.com. That's like in production, PRODUCE, producejustice.com, because ultimately that's what we're supposed to be trying to do on this program and in the book that you can get by going to producejustice.com. You're trying to produce a product by getting rid of racism and put something better in its place, and that logically speaking, would be a system of justice would be better than a system of racism. Go to producejustice.com.
Okay.
And everything that you need to get the book about that as an individual person, what you can do about it, and what you can do to help yourself in the process.
Okay. This Gmail says, don't allow yourself to be bought off by the $1,200 stimulus. They are slick like fish being caught by the hook which is baited. Mr. Fuller, your thoughts on that $1,200 stimulus that you're supposed to be getting, or whatever they call it?
I don't know enough about it to make a comment on it, other than I've heard, and it's vague in my mind about what it all means, that they're going to issue people $1,200. But I don't have the details on that and don't know enough about it to make an intelligent answer.
So, okay, since you don't have to make an intelligent answer, according to the code, what would one say based on what you just said, you not having the knowledge of it?
Well, if I was given the money, and I would want to know, what is that supposed to mean? What am I supposed to do with it? And am I supposed to pay it back? Or am I going to be penalized in some way somewhere down the road? And what is the money supposed to do? Why are you giving me this money? And what am I supposed to do with it?
Okay.
Am I going to be harmed, or am I going to be hurt? Those would be my questions. When anybody gives you anything, you want to know, now, is this going to harm me in any way, or is it going to help me? Because it's going to be one or the other. There's no such thing as in between.
All right. Okay, so there's a question. All right. All right, now let's go to this. Okay, James, you're on quickly. Let's see if we can get him over there. Let's see. It has him. Okay, there you go. James, you're on.
Good morning, gentlemen. I'd like to make a recommendation under VGQ, mainly because I've never heard anyone on this show speak on this matter. But anyway, I suggest that people who can hear my voice all over the world consider reading a work called Industrial Society and Its Future, also known as the Unabomber Manifesto. But I want to make one thing clear. I'm not suggesting that anybody do what Dr. Theodore Kaczynski did. I want to make that clear. But I think a person can learn a lot about the direction white supremacy is headed if they read that work. I think that's one of the most important works a person can ever read if they want to understand the direction that white supremacy is headed.
All right. Thank you, James.
Yes, sir.
All righty.
Goodbye.
Thank you. All righty. Callers, I'm going to tell you, you guys are something else. You're really good. And we, Mr. Fuller and myself, do appreciate the fact that you take the time to call. We thank you for getting the book and reading the book, not just letting it sit there and gain dust. Let's go over quickly. Mr. Fuller, you started off today's show about this confinement, and you mentioned that rather than looking at it as a negative, that use this time for thinking. You went on to discuss the refined and unrefined. David asked a question about that. White supremacists play all sides, but you pointed out that there is refined racism and unrefined racism, and then we got into this racial classification. Is it deliberate confusion? We addressed that, and this $1,200 stimulus. In the remaining minute and a half that we have on today's program, Mr. Fuller, your observations according to the code.
My observations on what?
Of this program, according to the code.
Well, the program is what it is. I mean, like you said, it's unrehearsed and whatnot, and I'm trying to answer questions in such a way. I always grade myself after every program that I have. I grade myself on not so much whether someone agrees or disagrees with what I'm saying. I grade myself on whether or not I am focused and that I have clarity in what I have presented. And I've never given myself out of 4 stars, that's the way I do it, never given myself over 2.5.
Okay.
Every now and then there's a little bit plus because it's always confusion. I always feel like I did not do the job that I'm supposed to be doing because, but I do my best.
I understand
in the time that I'm given.
Okay, well, the music is playing, so you know what that means. Thank you,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Fuller. Thank you, callers. Thank you, technicians. Thank you for everybody. Mr. Fuller and myself will see you next week. God bless you. And be careful. Stay safe.
White supremacy, what it is and how it works. Everything else that you do understand will confuse you. In all of these 9 areas of activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Anywhere on the planet, minute by minute, day by day, all of the time.